Jan put his head back against the wall behind him and closed his eyes. Outside, in the arena, you could hear the fighting, the smashing of bones, the splattering of blood, and the sound of crackling fire. He knew his teacher, Azai, was out there. Chosen to fight, forced to fight. Here in the Drytreck arena, men fought men and women fought women. For that, Jan was glad. He did not want to fight Azai, not because she was his mentor, but because none of them would stand a chance against her. Despite the gender-specific matchups, Jan and the people of Elmore were new to the arena, and they had a custom to weed out the weak. Your first few fights weren't against people, but instead against monsters taken straight from the endless sands of Sabia. If you couldn't beat the monsters, you were dead. If you were victorious, you were moved on to the next phase. Combat against one of Drytreck's gladiators. Jan and the others weren't told when they would be fighting, but he hadn't fought yet, so he assumed he would be next. A smart assumption as one of the Drytreck arena guards grabbed him by the arm and threw him near a metal gate. Peering through it, Jan could see the aftermath of Metalized victory. 3 dead beasts lay scattered around the area as the Drytreck guards put out their flames on the ground. Jan waited patiently as the guards cleaned up the remains. Then the gate in front of him opened. He walked out slowly into the arena. The crowd was getting restless. Jan was quite surprised with how many people showed up. The people of Elmore weren't told much about Sabia. Their kingdom was just north of where the arena was located, but rumor that the queen who ruled there had no idea that these gladiator matches were being held in her own kingdom. Sabia was vast, so it is possible that the arena went under the radar, but there are other rumors going around that the Queen of Sabia was an undead monster who would probably approve of what was going on here, instead of trying to shut it down. These were issues Jan couldn't concern himself with as he stood in the middle of the arena, awaiting his opponent. Finally, a gate opened. Jan could see 2 guards struggling to hold back a very, very large monster scorpion. The scorpion threw them aside and rushed out into the open as the guards closed the gate. Jan was only given a few pieces of armor that barely covered his body. There were weapons all over the arena to use, but he would have to find them if he wanted to use them. As the scorpion moved side to side, dangerously close to the crowd in attendance, Jan panicked and stuck his hands in the sand to try and find one of the aforementioned weapons. Before he could find one, the scorpion became aware of his presence. As if the beast knew why it was there, it pursued Jan with the killer instinct. Its large, pointy tail came crashing down just in front of Jan, and he managed to roll out of harm's way. He felt something against his back as it rolled, and he noticed a spear on the ground. Luckily, Azai had trained him in all manners of weapons. Stomping the ground to force the spear up into his hand in one swift motion, Jan drove the spear into the scorpion's mouth. Even the scorpion was taken by surprise as the crowd gasped. Its tail continued to try and hit Jan, but he dodged it with each attack with ease. Finally, he steadied his feet in the sand and used all of his might to push forward, driving the spear deeper. A horrifying screech exited the scorpion as it did its last breath. Pure silence filled the arena. No one thought it would be over this fast, and no one thought Yan would be the victor. Once the silence broke, the crowd cheered for Yan. Yan nodded and dropped the spear, then headed for his gate to return. But it wasn't his gate that opened. It was the gate that the scorpion came from. Yan realized in this moment that he had become unlucky. Since arriving in the Drytreck arena, the other prisoners, as well as the other gladiators, had spoken of a man, the Drytreck arena's champion, Azai. If someone impressed Azai, he wanted to meet them and fight them. Supposedly, he wasn't a very patient man, and Yan was about to learn that firsthand. Unfortunately for Yan, that only men fought men and women fought women, as he was sure that Azai would pick Natalai to fight. A fight that Natalai would surely win, but given what he had heard of Azai so far, Yan didn't like his chances. Azai was not what you would expect from a gladiator champion. He was tall, not very muscular, and looked more like a mortal than a fighter. Men and women alike adored him, and he presented himself in a way that was very elegant and debonair. However, it would be a fatal mistake to underestimate him in the arena. The armor that they gave Azai was leather and covered most of his body, and his sword was a katana that they say he took from the dead hands of the first man he killed in the Drytreck arena. Yan found himself without a choice and returned to the center of the sand where Azai approached him. Azai didn't say a word, and Yan chose to do the same. If he was going to earn his place in the Drytreck arena, he would need to prove that he wasn't afraid of Azai. Even if he lost this fight, if he somehow managed to keep his life, it would force the other prisoners and guards to respect him. Yan threw the first punch, but every martial arts attack he had learned from Natalai was easily dodged by Azai with very little effort. Yan ran to the scorpion's corpse that still littered the battlefield and removed the spear, once again throwing every attack he knew at Azai. But the Drytreck arena's champion continued to nonchalantly avoid each individual strike. Yan was breathing heavy, the heat of the midday sun beating on him, and the sand made it hard to focus. He readied himself for another spear strike and jumped at Azai with everything he had. Azai finally removed his katana from its sheath and swatted the spear out of Yan's hands. When Yan once again touched the ground, he stumbled and fell to his knees. Azai lifted his katana in the air with one hand. When Yan looked up at him, he saw the sun shine around Azai and reflect off the steel of the blade above him. Despite the cheering of the crowd, Yan only thought of how he let his teacher down. "I thought you were worthy," said Azai. "I was wrong." And with that, Azai brought down his blade